one and only time to try to build in the construction another spectator who would be the spectator tout court, the spectator in general. And then one can decide whether it succeeds or fails, but it's a huge effort, and he never does that quite again. I mean, the other closest he comes to it would be himself in the L'Atelier de Peintre, the distinction between himself and the woman in the painting, and then the little boy who looks on. But the burial is a kind of massively impressive attempt, I think, to try to make some kind of separation.
In the painting.
In the painting. In the painting. You can't see it in the Musée d'Orsay. I mean, Courbet is destroyed in the Musée d'Orsay. You know, he almost doesn't exist there because it's so dark, it's so horrible.
But in the exhibition was better. In the Courbet exhibition was better.
It was better, and in the old days in the Louvre, it was wonderful. Courbet should never have been moved from the Louvre because it made complete historical sense to go from David to Courbet. And David, Gros, Géricault, Delacroix, Courbet in those two rooms. Then you can go to Manet somewhere else, but preferably not the Musée d'Orsay.
Generally, Musée d'Orsay was not a good idea.
Terrible. Terrible. As a museum, terrible.
Oh, I have a little question. I tried to speak in English.
But you can.
No, I try.
Okay.
It's about the modernism of Manet. I know that you have studied Manet in different essays, from 3 American painters to.
Oh, yeah. Long time ago.
You change your your point of view, your interpretation. So for me now it's a bit confusing. So I would like to ask some information or to clear. In the 3 American painters, you gave an interpretation, modernist interpretation, as the beginner of the traditional modernist painting. And after, in Manet, modernism is like is changing its position. It's more dialectic. Is presence. Is something. This is at the end of the tradition, and at the same time the beginning of another tradition. Is a dialectic position. But I would like to know the term of faciness could be read in terms of modernism interpretation. Still, in Manet, would like to see faciness is not only that the painting is face to the spectator in every point of the surface, but give this il montre. Je parle en français. Le tableau montre en fait ses propres instruments, sa façon, ses moyens de la peinture même. Donc je veux dire, c'est encore une lecture moderniste ou ça n'a rien à voir le faciness with that concept?
You know, yes, but here's the problem I have with the. I mean, if one wants to identify modernism with something like the painting showing its da-da-da, then it turns out that every painting does that. Okay? Just always. You know, I mean, if I were to try to say, well, what Poussin doesn't do that, or Raphael's Sistine Madonna doesn't, you know, Rita Rossa, you know. So I want the. So the reason, let's say, the book is called Courbet's Realism would be, and this is all part of trying to answer, would be, the point of that would be to say, Courbet's Realism. Then there's a book called Menzel's Realism. You see what I mean? In other words, instead of saying what realism is, this is what realism was for Courbet, this is what realism was for Menzel, this is what realism. So in the case of Manet, yes, I think it makes a lot of sense to think of Manet as the first modernist painter, but it takes me that whole book to try to say what Manet's modernism involved. And it involves all this complicated stuff. I mean, even the quotations of earlier art from the past, and you see, so I don't want to even say, well, for him, it's faciness. for his whole generation, there's faciness, there's also what I call strikiness, you know, il faut frapper fort, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole set of things, but whatever modernism meant for Manet was some very complicated, you know, project with a lot of them. That's the point of the argument. So that's why I don't want to turn modernism into reflexiveness, self-reflexiveness, because if you go that route, then c'est pas tout. You know, it makes no sense to think that a great altarpiece isn't self-reflective. You see what I'm saying? And I think that was one of the weaknesses of that way of trying to do modernism, to simplify it that way. Because you do that and you've lost your hold on it. It's also true that I now think of all of these turning points as having, I mean, you said dialectical, that's right, having a complicated structure. You know, as if this whole development begins. If suppose I'm going to say, well, all right, so there's Diderot, and then, so does it begin with Chardin, or does it begin with Greuze, or does it begin with that? Well, Greuze is clearly crucial, but Greuze only is crucial with respect to then the Chardin before, and in a way the David to come. So you get a kind of brisure, you know, with these, at least these three parts, and it's recursive, right? You couldn't say Chardin is the beginning. Chardin's only, he functions dialectically in relation to Greuze, who functions dialectically in relation to Chardin and David, and with David suddenly something gets so the beginning, the structure of the beginning is this already a complicated structure. And so for me also, if you were to say, well, what's the moment of modernism, it turns out to be a structure that Courbet, Manet, Impressionism. You know, with Manet at the center, Manet crucial, but Manet in a dialectical relation to Courbet, and then, but imagine you had Manet and you didn't have Impressionism. I mean, just imagine, you know, if we could imagine it, that the whole sequence after Manet turns out to be different, then it's very hard to imagine that Manet would look like, you know, what he looks like to us. So that's part of the, you know, I now feel that things like beginnings and climaxes have these much more complicated, internally dialectical structures. I think it's a good point to stop.
Okay.
My voice is going.
It's okay. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Oui, alors on se retrouve dans cette salle demain matin à 9h, c'est possible? 9, it's okay.
Whatever.
It's okay for you? Merci beaucoup.